Gotta be honest, I don't think I can really call it tiny trucks anymore. Geez, I don't even know where to put the bloody thing. We'll figure something out. Okay. As you can see, I've started my MC8. And this was the subject of my very first video on this channel back in 2018. I did say it was a winter project when I got it then. I hadn't realised it was going to be sort of thick end of about another sort of 16, 17 months before I started. But anyway, we have actually, we've built stuff, we've dug in, it's coming on quite well. So what we'll do is I'll try and find a camera angle where we can at least get most of it in as I point the details out. So what I figured is we'd just start basically in the same order as a manual. I just go through, what I think about wheels, tyres, axles, gearbox, chassis build, and we'll leave the bodywork to another time. So I'll just spin everything round, try and zoom in, and we'll go from there. Right, wheels and tyres. First step, first problem. Absolute nightmare. Just a complete pain in the backside. I'm not quite sure what it is. I suspect it's something to do with radius and the fact that these are pressed. There is a little bit of movement of the wheel itself within the tyre. There's a little bit of slack. And the biggest problem I've got is that actually trying to get a bead sat all the way around. So this one is my problem child and is the one I just can't fix. So you can see here that the bead just opens up and just rips straight out of the rim. I can't fix it. So I spent probably 2.5 hours on this particular one. I've swapped the tyre around, I've rotated the wheel, I nicked the tyre off the plastic wheel that you get to put on the cab. The other 7 weren't fun. A lot of those were, you put together, you get 90% of the way there and then the bead would just slip out just as you did the last tighten, last round on the nuts. Hugely infuriating, and infuriating enough that actually I just gave in and bought different wheels and tyres, and I'll use these as my Shelf Queen set, which is a shame because they do look lovely, particularly with the hubcaps in. They look fantastic. I did toy with the idea of potentially buying another set of wheels and then getting another set of those tyres to go on it, but that's quite an expensive venture. So for the moment, these look pretty. They'll sit on the shelf when they're nice and clean, and actually I'll take these ones out and run them round a bit. So the wheels it's got on it are cheap. I think they're China made Endura Steelies. They're a cast metal. They weigh a reasonable amount. I can't believe it. I mean, I paid, it was ridiculous. I think it was 14 quid for 4. So I got all 8 for 28 quid, including shipping when I did it. And the tyres are Chinese copies off eBay. Now, I must admit, these are the same as what Anthony from Antar-C is running, which is why I'd got the wheels in the first place. And then I'd noticed that he's changed tyres. And the main reason for that is that they're exactly the same in height terms as the standard cross ones, which means that you don't need to do any cutting on the wheel arches. So everything just fits and everything just clears, which is good. Now, what I hadn't realised was that they were, when I bought them, that they were copies of the RC four-wheel drive wheels. And I mean, and to be honest, these were, I think I paid 36 quid for 8, which is not too bad. But you pay, I think it's £18 for the RC four-wheel drive for a pair. So you pretty much, these are half the price, but with all the flash in it and not supporting the original brand, I'm a little bit, I probably should have done something different. But hey, we didn't. This is what we've got. So we'll work with it. If they're any good, chances are I'll plumb for a set of originals. Now, I had shot a nice little build video on taking the axles apart, stripping them, cleaning them out, shimming them up, replacing all the grease in the bearings and putting it all back together again. But my Mac has decided that it just isn't in the mood to process 1080 video at 60 frames a second. It just can't cope with it at the moment. So I've managed to siphon out a bit where I built the third axle on this. So what we'll do is we'll cut over and run that through, and then we'll come back and talk about the gearbox when that's done. So, splits. Okay, so the good news is that they've shimmed up the main housing and done actually quite a nice job on that. That bearing's quite loose on the shaft, but so this is what I'm trying to fix. So best place to shim these is in the gap between the shoulder on the shaft itself and the bearing. So the shaft diameter on these is 5mm. So I've got some genuine Kaisho parts, so 5x7mm shim set, and they come in various thicknesses: 0.1, 0.2, 0.3. So that allows you to do your stacking up to sort your tolerances out then. So we'll have a quick look. So try and pick it up. So I'm sure that this feels more than just a 0.3mm plate. But we'll just stick that in there, put that in. You can see we've still got quite a wobble on that. So if that does it, I think I'm going to try another 0.3. Perfect. So still free enough to rotate, but no perceptible play left to right. So the side's much smaller. We'll try that with a 0.3 again, but we can go down to a 0.2 if we need to. So again, these are small enough that the shim actually just sits on the inside face of the bearing roller there, so you're not going to cause any problems by having any shims in contact with both. Actually, that's a bit tight, so stick that back in a 0.3. Let's see if we can get a 0.2 in there. So good, so no plate there. If we just loosely pop that on top, no problem, nice and tight, nice and tight. So when I say nice and tight, I mean that there's no plate, everything's free to rotate. Okay, so the bit that you didn't see in that video was actually siliconing the two halves together and greasing the bearings. I did use a bearing greaser for it. Oh, did I need to do it? It's a personal thing, really. I'm going to take the truck wading. It just struck me as a good idea to, put lithium marine grease in all the bearings. They're lightly oiled rather than greased, so, it's worth forcing the grease out. And actually, it's not a particularly difficult job. I did have a problem on this, that one of these bolts had been cross-threaded, so that was an easy fix. By the time you got it out, you can just run a tap through. And to be fair, I actually did quite a lot of re-tapping on this, but that was just more for, for my personal benefit than anything else. Gearbox itself, treated exactly the same. It comes pre-built, as did the axles. Took it to pieces, cleaned it up, repacked all the bearings. It has to be said, aside from the drive shaft shimming, which you saw in the video, all the other shimming was bob on. Between the gears, the pinions, the shafts, spur gears, everything meshed really nicely, so I was quite happy with that. And in fact, the only thing of interest on the gearbox was the top cover. So there were a couple of burrs on the back end of the holes for the screw thread, which holds this top cover in place here. And the problem was that stopped the top cover sitting nicely down and meeting up with the flange that the motor mounts on. So again, quick, easy fix, and then a little waft of silicone around that as well to seal it back up again. Other than that, the chassis has gone together really well. I did you know, I cleared all the holes out. So anything that's tapped M3 got cleared out with a tap just to remove the paint. I've got heavy duty springs on the front axle, and I should have heavy duty springs on the second axle, but I was a muppet and only ordered a pair at the time, so the second pair of springs have just arrived, so I'll put those in and help to reinforce the front of the truck. Painting wise, I stripped the anodized blue off the shock absorbers. I used an oven cleaner for that, and unfortunately, rather than leaving it in for a couple of hours, I ended up leaving it in for 24, which was a really bad idea. It cleaned the outside up, but it furred all the inside up, which meant that you couldn't actually fit the pistons back in. So in the end, I had to wrap some sandpaper around a brass rod, mount the shock absorber in a drill bit, and actually just physically sand everything out and clean it back up again. So we've got them back to where they move. I mean, let's be honest, they're friction dampers. They don't hold any oil. The oil's only in there to act as a bit of lubrication between the seal and the side. And they do suffer from the usual stiction, but you know, we can cope with that. I would like to put some proper oil-filled dampers on it at some point, but I actually haven't. You know, I was waiting to finish the truck, get the weight on it, measure the centre to centre height, see what the compression requirements are, and then use that to determine what shocks to buy. The link rods, so all the link rods are all a nice shiny, I'm not sure if it's stainless steel or just a nice shiny steel with a high chromium content. They've all been painted, so a technique for that was to put all the rod ends on, build them all up as sub-assemblies, and then just wrap masking tape around the top face and just take them out into the garage, shoot them with a coat of etch primer, then satin black. You know, kind of job that actually, when you've done the masking and everything else, takes you maybe 5 minutes to paint them all. You can leave it for sort of, you know, day and a half or what have you, and then you can do the build, and it just cleans things up. I mean, arguably it would be nice to do all the nuts as well, but you know, I've kind of, you know, there's a point at which I'm just trying to make sure that it looks okay in photographs from the side, so just slightly less chrome stuff, for want of a better phrase. Other than that, it went together. You'll see that there's a front brace that normally sits up here. This is where the front cab pivots from. I had a bit of a problem in that when I took one of the screws out for the cab pivot, for some reason it just managed to ball the thread up and it just wouldn't actually extract. So I've actually destroyed the thread in that, so I'm going to have to make a new cross piece in aluminium, which is not the end of the world, but a little bit frustrating given that I'd only fitted it once. Whether I'd got a slightly dodgy screw or bolt then, I don't know. And other than that, that's it. So at the moment, and I say at the moment, it's running standard steering servo. So you've got a plastic cross piece here, which acts as a cross piece for the side, just mounts the servo, and you can see, hopefully, tilt it that way, that you've got the steering horn. So the horn itself is asymmetric, so it changes the angle of the steering wheels so that the second axle has a less sharp angle on it than the first, which helps with tracking. But you can see that we've got some quite unusual and slightly wayward steering linkages going on there. So the next upgrade for this, or the future upgrade, is moving across to a twin servo setup. So I have, while I'm learning to use my 3D printer, built a new cross brace which will hold two of those servos. So these are the JX 46 kilogram servos, available on eBay for sort of 48-50 quid. And what we're going to do is move this servo forward and put another servo back here. So this will actually sit, you can see that the holes in this will line up with the holes in that, and that allows you to just run a conventional aluminium steering arm across, one to the front axle, one to the back axle, and that brings the steering linkages in line with the drag link between the two of them. So it gives slightly better steering angle, a bit more control. You know, these suffer a little bit from restricted clearance on the suspension, and you can get some unusual axle movement. So sometimes the axles, depending on what's happening with the rest of the truck, the axle can rotate in relation to the rest of the chassis. But you know, it's fairly minor, and I'm going to, you know, I'll be honest, the twin servo thing is not perfect either. He's got quite a lot of things to try and squeeze clearance for in here in terms of linkages and arms, particularly on full travel, but I quite liked it from an engineering challenge. So once we've got 3D printed one that works properly, that mocks up, works on the desk, then I'll start machining one out of aluminium and drop that in as a final fit then. I suppose the only other point to note is the rear light housings. Anthony from Ant RC said, did say, leave them off, you'll break them. And I built the chassis and I thought, oh, I'll put them on, it'll be all right now. And I knackered it pretty much within 5 minutes. Just, it's so long to move around. It's whatever, I think it's 815 millimeters as it stands at the moment. Swinging that round in a room, you know, my room is barely 6 feet wide. You know, this thing's taking up, you know, 45% of it when you move it round. So unfortunately, you get my hand caught in the wrong bit and that's it. The result is just a quick snappage. So nothing major. And, you know, £7 fix, because this one seems to have ignored every bit of glue I've thrown at it so far. So it's had, you know, ABS, glue, it's had mech pack on it. It's just, yeah, it's not sticking. So it's going to be weak whatever happens to it. So I'll do it properly and just replace it with new bits. Right, I think that pretty much covers it for this build. I don't think there's anything exciting. I suppose this is the only bone of contention I've got, which is the amount of free play that you have in the gearbox. So if you constrain the axles themselves are pretty good. You know, you're going to get some movement. You've got pass-throughs and God knows what. But the worst part is because it's a 2-speed transmission and the way that the dogs engage with the slot on the output gear, it means you end up with quite a lot of rotation. So for the moment, I'm just going to build it as is. And then we'll see what it's like in speed terms. Now, if it turns out that first gear's what I think is going to be quick enough, given the size of the damn thing, then what I will do is I will take it out and I will physically drill and pin the shafts and basically lock it in first gear, and that will remove all of the slack, and that will get me down to what I think is a bit more of an acceptable standard then. But other than that, it's not bad. I quite enjoy putting it together. You do a lot of sub-assembly and then it all comes together quite quickly. It's good fun. It's massive. I have temporarily just fired it up with a loose battery pack and a speed controller, and everything works and it moves backwards and forwards. It steered okay, you know, no nasty noises, and second gear works. That's all you can ask of it, really. So the next stage is cracking on with the bodywork, which you've seen a shot of the built bed and the started cab. So I'll shoot that for the next video. Okay, thanks very much for watching.